So, have you ever stopped to think about how a single person's story, their own personal conviction, can end up shaping the economic policy for an entire country? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore here. We're diving into the economic vision of Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, and it's a vision forged in a crucible of incredible personal tragedy. To really understand the policy, you first have to understand the man. Before his time in government, Howard Lutnick was the head of Cantor Fitzgerald. Their offices were right at the very top of the World Trade Center. So when you hear this quote, it's not just some corporate mission statement. It is the key to understanding everything that followed the September 11th attacks. And this number? This number puts that mission into stark, heartbreaking perspective. 658. That's not just a statistic. That's the number of his employees, his friends, and his own brother who were lost that day. An immense tragedy like that, and the promise he made to their families, well, that's something that would shape his path for years and years to come. Okay, so how does a personal mission like that translate into national policy? Well, for Lutnick, the vulnerability that America felt on 9/11 isn't just a military issue. He sees it as an economic one. He frames our entire situation today as a diagnosis of a problem that's been decades in the making. So, what's at the core of his diagnosis? It's this. According to Lutnick, starting way back after World War II and continuing through decades of trade deals, the U.S. effectively exported $1.2 trillion of its own economy. Now, this helped build up Europe, Japan, and Southeast Asia, but he argues it often came at the expense of our own industrial base right here at home. And the administration points to data just like this as proof that a reversal is underway. In the third quarter, while Europe was pretty much flat and Japan's economy was actually shrinking, the U.S. economy grew by 4.4%, and they argue this is absolutely not an accident. This quote really captures the confidence behind that data. Lutnick recalls that he was met with a lot of skepticism. He was even laughed at when he first predicted 4% growth. But now, he's arguing that the momentum is just getting started, with even higher growth rates on the horizon. But this big push for domestic growth is driven by more than just economics. It's about what they see as a serious threat to national security, where global supply chains are no longer just seen as efficient, but as dangerously vulnerable. The argument here is that while America was focused on other things, our competitor nations, especially China, were strategically building up their own industrial policies. And in doing so, they created choke points in critical supply chains that could be exploited. Let's look at how this strategy works, using the example of China's electric vehicle market. It starts with fierce, state-subsidized internal competition between more than 100 companies. The government gives them capital and cheap electricity, which leads to massive overproduction, way more cars than their domestic market can possibly buy. So what happens to the excess cars? They get dumped on the global market at prices far below what they actually cost to make. And this quote just sums it up perfectly. What looks like chaotic competition inside the country gets honed into a tool of external power. A tool that's capable of undercutting and even destroying industries in other countries by just flooding the market with impossibly cheap goods. So when you hear them use this term weaponization, this is exactly what they mean. It's when a country can threaten to cut off your supply of something essential, whether it's magnets or pharmaceutical ingredients, to force you to do something politically. All of a sudden, what was once seen as a benefit of globalization becomes a critical vulnerability. So, given that diagnosis and that threat, what's the proposed cure? Well, the administration's answer is a really comprehensive industrial policy. It's all designed to reshore, rebuild, and secure America's economic independence. But before you can unleash American industry, you have to figure out what's holding it back in the first place. What's the main obstacle? The answer, they say? Regulatory hurdles, red tape. Lutnick gives this pretty wild example of a $100 billion Micron facility that got delayed over a theoretical bat habitat for bats that might have been in the trees. He uses this as a prime example of why the permitting process just needs a dose of common sense. So the plan is a multi-pronged attack. It's not just one thing. It's about clearing out those permitting roadblocks and using smart tariffs to stop foreign dumping. But most importantly, it's about securing the entire supply chain, not just the factories. We're talking everything from mining the raw materials to processing them, making sure the U.S. isn't dependent on any other single country for a critical step. Ultimately, the vision here is a fundamental shift in our whole mindset. It's about moving away from celebrating the cheapest, most efficient global supply chain and moving towards building one that's resilient, one that can withstand geopolitical shocks, and, crucially, one that can't be used against us. And to make this vision a reality, the administration is targeting the very foundations of a modern economy. We're not talking about niche products here. We're talking about the bedrock. Semiconductors that power everything, pharmaceuticals we need to stay healthy, and the essential metals that build our infrastructure and our defense systems. The ambition here is just massive. I mean, take semiconductors. The goal isn't just to build a few factories. It's to capture a staggering 40% of the entire global market for the most advanced chips, basically starting from scratch. That's a clear signal that this isn't about minor adjustments. This is about fundamentally reordering the global landscape. This quote perfectly captures that shift in posture from being passive to being active. The administration sees itself not as some passenger in the global economy, but as the one firmly in control, actively driving policy to get specific national results. And here's a great example of that forward-leaning approach. They're creating a national stockpile of critical minerals, but not just for the Pentagon. This is a backup for private American companies. You can think of it like an insurance policy. If an adversary ever tries to cut off our supply, the U.S. government can step in and keep American factories online and running. Which leaves all of us with a pretty fundamental question. In a world where economics has become a battlefield, what's the true cost of security? Is being self-sufficient worth the price of maybe higher costs or less efficiency? That's really the debate at the very heart of this new economic vision.